All right, so my name is Sonja Sundstrom, and I did my presentation on the system of a bee colony. So, honeybees help pollinate high-value specialty crops such as berries, nuts, fruits, vegetables, all the goods. They add more than $15 billion in value to these crops, so it's no secret that these guys are needed. In the fall of 2006, we began to notice managed honeybee colonies disappearing. This syndrome of disappearance of adult honeybees in a hive is called colony collapse disorder. Beekeepers reported losses of 30 to 90% of hives by winter 2006. And in the wintertime, it is expected colony losses will happen, but not to the extent to which it did. So what is the buzz? Why are the bees suddenly disappearing? And how can we stop our pollinators from dying off? There are many theories connected to colony collapse disorder, but I'll be talking about the theory of neonicotinoid use causing the rapid decline in bee colonies. So what are neonicotinoids, and how does it affect the bees? Well, neonicotinoids are a pesticide based on nicotine that is used on farms and urban landscapes. They are absorbed by plants, soaking into the pollen and nectar, which ultimately intoxicates the bees. Through observing the system and the system's thinking matter, I was able to conclude how we can keep and sustain our bee colonies and avoid colony collapse disorder from neonicotinoid use. I will tell you now that this conclusion does not include completely banning neonicotinoid use, since this pesticide is beneficial for farmers needing pest control. Before I give anything more away, I'm going to set up this situation as a fun little story to help you further understand the system of bee colonies in relation to colony collapse disorder. I will then walk you through my systems diagram and the connections and conclusions I was able to make based on my diagram. So this is Sally. Sally loves bees, so she became a beekeeper. Sally is very knowledgeable about beekeeping. Knowing about all the preventative and mitigative measures a beekeeper must know helps Sally utilize these measures to help build and sustain her bee colonies. Now we have Bob. Bob is a farmer who happens to be Sally's neighbor. Bob realizes that he has begun to have a pest issue with his crops and plants, so he decides to try out neonicotinoids. Bob is unaware that his actions have implications to other systems around him. Ultimately, Sally's bees encounter Bob's crops and plants that have been sprayed with neonicotinoids. The adult bees who have come into contact with neonicotinoids now have begun to die off, and thus leading to colony collapse disorder in Sally's hive. Sally is confused because of the rapid decline of her bees. Sally doesn't know that her neighbor Bob has decided to try out neonicotinoids on the plants that her bees are exposed to. Sally needs to be aware of the environment her bees are in, and as well as be aware of the farmers around her that are using this pesticide on their crops. If Sally is aware of this, she can readjust her preventative measures, such as relocating her hives to better sustain her bee colonies. Sometimes this happens. Beekeepers may find themselves in situations where areas around them adopt pesticide use. Sometimes this means beekeepers and farmers have to find a compromise, and sometimes this means hives have to be relocated. CCD is a complex disorder because, like I mentioned, there are different theories of different contributing factors to the loss of bee colonies. The systems diagram I created is only tapping into one of these theories. Upon building my model, I knew identifying the source, the inflow, the stock, the outflow, and the sink were going to be relatively easy. The source is the beekeepers, and the inflow to the stock of amount of bee colonies is the implementation of mitigative and preventative measures, with the valve in this being number of measures being implemented. The more measures taken, the more a beekeeper can produce and sustain bee colonies. The outflow from the stock of amount of bees is the spraying of neonicotinoids, the valve in this being the number of plants being affected. The more plants affected, the more bees are exposed, thus leading to the sink of colony collapse disorder. The trouble in creating my diagram came when I realized that the interconnections weren't clear-cut. After observing my diagram, it was clear that the outflow and the source had a connection that were crucial to the stock. From this realization, I came to the conclusion that beekeepers must have knowledge of the environment in which they are being kept in, as we discovered in Sally and Bob's story. If the beekeeper doesn't have knowledge of pesticide use near the hives, the beekeeper is not adequately implementing these preventative measures, thus affecting the amount of bee colonies. Off of this same thought, there can be another connection from the sink of colony collapse disorder to the inflow of implementation of mitigative and preventative measures. Figuring out this interconnection also creates a more broad outlook on the whole situation of colony collapse disorder and doesn't just look at the one theory of neonicotinoid use being the cause of the disorder. Colony collapse disorder is directly related to the measures being taken to sustain bee colonies. If colony collapse disorder has taken place, recognizing if and what measures were being implemented will be a good place to start to find out how beekeepers ended up in this predicament. Examples of measures beekeepers could implement could include locating or relocating hives in safe and appropriate places, which is a measure that is most connected to neonicotinoid theory, avoiding stress on the bees, medicating bees against nosema disease, or keeping in contact with the EPA. We all know bees can cause a significant amount of stress in our lives during the summertime. I'll admit, even if I see a bee that doesn't have a stinger, I'm still running around to avoid it. The stress is especially real for those of you who are allergic. But looking at the bigger picture, we need the bees. They're our pollinators. They help us keep prices of fruit and vegetables lower. They allow us to eat blue diamond lightly salted almonds. Bees are awesome, so let's keep them around.